The lawyer finally read the will. I leave my wife £1. The £50 manor goes to my mistress. I was worth exactly $1 to the man I had called my husband for 7 years. I learned that while standing in a room full of people who had always waited for me to fall. The rain had started before dawn that morning. It slid down the tall windows of Ashworth Manor and turned the gardens into gray shadows. I stood alone in the drawing room, dressed in black, listening to the steady tapping against the glass. The roses outside bent low under the weight of the storm. I had planted those roses the first spring after my wedding. I had believed they would grow as my marriage grew. I had believed many foolish things. My husband, Philip Ashworth, had been dead for 11 days. They said it was a sudden fever, fast, merciless. I had sat beside his bed through every hour of it. I had pressed cool cloths to his burning skin. I had whispered comfort into ears that never truly turned toward me. Even in his final breath, his eyes searched the room as if he expected someone else to appear. I told myself it was the sickness speaking. I did not want to know the truth. At 10 sharp, the lawyer arrived. Mr. Thomas Blackwell was a thin man with pale eyes behind round glasses. He carried a leather case as if it held something sacred. I greeted him with steady hands and a straight back. I was still Mrs. Eleanor Ashworth, still the lady of this house. At least I believed I was. I had expected a private reading of the will, a quiet meeting between widow and solicitor. Instead, the drawing room was already occupied. My sister-in-law, Prudence Whitmore, sat near the fireplace in perfect mourning attire. Not a strand of her dark hair was out of place. Beside her stood her husband, Richard Whitmore, tall and stiff, his mouth pressed into a thin line. And in the far corner of the room sat a woman I did not recognize. She was younger than me, auburn hair tucked neatly beneath a small hat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She did not look at anyone. She stared down as if waiting for judgment. Something inside me shifted, but I lifted my chin and took my seat. I would not show fear. I would not show doubt. The rain grew louder. The fire cracked in the hearth. Mr. Blackwell opened his case and removed the folded papers. He began with long sentences filled with legal words about property and investments. I listened without truly hearing. My mind drifted to the last conversation I had with Philip before he fell ill. He had spoken of putting things in order, of changing documents. I had not asked questions. He never liked questions. Then the lawyer said my name. To my wife, Eleanor Ashworth, I leave the sum of $1. For a moment I believed I had misunderstood. $1. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. My heart beat so loudly I was sure they could hear it. Prudence's lips curved before she could stop herself. A quick flicker of satisfaction crossed her face. Mr. Blackwell continued reading. The remainder of my estate, including Ashworth Manor, the townhouse in Boston, all lands, investments and assets totaling approximately $50 million, I leave to Miss Margaret Sinclair. The woman in the corner slowly raised her head. Our eyes met. Her eyes were pale blue, not proud, not pleased. There was something else there, something that looked almost like sorrow, but I could not think about her sorrow. $50 million, the house, the land, everything gone. I gripped the arm of my chair. My knuckles turned white. Who is she? I asked, my voice barely steady. Mr. Blackwell adjusted his glasses. Miss Sinclair was a companion to your husband. Companion. The word echoed in my mind like a gunshot. Prudence let out a soft laugh before covering it with a cough. I stood slowly. It felt as if I were standing in cold water that reached my chest, heavy, suffocating. Companion, I repeated. The woman rose from her chair. She looked at me fully now. There were tears in her eyes. I never meant for this to hurt you, she said softly. Her voice was gentle, almost kind. That kindness broke something inside me. I did not shout. I did not cry. I had been raised too well for such scenes. Instead, I walked out of the room. The hallway felt longer than it ever had before. The portraits of past Ashworth generations stared down at me as I passed. I climbed the staircase and entered the bedroom that had never truly felt like mine. Philip had kept separate rooms for most of our marriage. I closed the door and leaned against it. $1. 7 years of loyalty. 7 years of dinners hosted, Guests entertained, staff managed, smiles forced. $1, a knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Ashworth. It was Mrs. Porter, the housekeeper. She had worked here longer than I had been alive. Yes. There is a carriage waiting. Your Aunt Caroline has sent for you. My aunt, the only family I had left. I opened the door. Mrs. Porter's eyes were red. I'm sorry, she whispered. Those words nearly undid me. Within an hour my trunk was packed, my belongings reduced to what could fit inside a single case. I descended the stairs for the last time. The marble floors gleamed beneath the gray light. The chandelier shimmered. Everything looked the same, yet nothing belonged to me anymore. As I stepped outside, the rain soaked the hem of my black dress. And there at the bottom of the steps stood a man I recognized, Sebastian. He had once been Philip's close friend. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair touched with silver at the temples. His eyes were sharp and searching. I came as soon as I heard, he said quietly. You heard about my husband's death? I asked. His jaw tightened. I heard about the will. So the humiliation had already spread. I see, I said. There was something in his expression, not pity, something closer to anger. I am sorry, he said. For what? I asked calmly. For his death. Or for the fact that I am worth $1. His eyes darkened. You are worth far more than he ever understood, he said. The words struck deeper than he could have known, but I did not stay to hear more. I stepped into the carriage. The door shut behind me. The horses began to move. Through the rain-streaked window I watched Ashworth Manor fade into gray mist, and I made myself a promise. I would learn who Margaret Sinclair truly was. I would learn why my husband had chosen her over me, and I would not let my story end with one single dollar. The rain followed me all the way to Hartford, as if the sky itself wished to witness my disgrace. My aunt's house stood at the edge of town. A tall white home with green shutters and wide steps that had once felt like safety to me. I had spent summers there as a girl, running through her garden and believing the world was simple. As the carriage stopped, I saw her waiting at the door despite the weather. She did not speak when I stepped down. She simply opened her arms. I had held myself together through the reading of the will. I had held myself together when I walked out of my own home, but in my aunt's embrace my strength left me. He left me $1, I whispered against her shoulder. She did not gasp. She did not curse. She only held me tighter. Then we shall see what that dollar truly means, she said quietly. Inside, the house was warm. A fire burned bright in the hearth. Tea waited on a small table by the window. It felt like another world from the one I had just left. I told her everything, about the lawyer, about Prudence's smile, about the $50 million, about the woman with pale blue eyes who had inherited my life. Margaret Sinclair, my aunt repeated slowly. I have heard that name before. My heart jumped. Where? In whispers, she said. Years ago, before your engagement was announced. She walked toward the window, her hands clasped behind her back. There were rumors, she continued. Philip was once attached to a young governess. It was said he wished to marry her. His father would not allow it. The words felt like ice sliding down my spine. He chose duty instead, I said softly. He chose me. Yes, my aunt replied. But perhaps he never truly stopped choosing her. The truth hurt more than the insult of the will. It meant my marriage had never been a love story. It had been a bargain. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. 7 years of cold distance suddenly made sense. The late nights, the separate rooms, the way he had looked through me instead of at me. He had loved someone else all along, and now she had inherited everything. But as I closed my eyes, one thought refused to leave me. If Margaret had once been his lost love, why had Philip waited until his final days to change the will? And who had truly benefited from my humiliation? The next morning I woke with the taste of betrayal still heavy in my mouth. For a few seconds I forgot everything. I forgot the rain. I forgot the will. I forgot the single dollar that had erased 7 years of my life. Then memory returned all at once, sharp and cruel. I dressed slowly and went downstairs. My aunt was already seated at the breakfast table, calm as always, as if she had been expecting war and had already prepared for it. You did not sleep, she said gently. No, I answered. I was married to a stranger. Before she could reply, the butler entered and cleared his throat. There is a visitor for you, Mrs. Ashworth. My chest tightened. Who? Mr. Sebastian Hale. My aunt's eyes lifted with quiet interest. Show him in. Sebastian entered the drawing room still carrying that same intensity I had seen outside the manor. He removed his hat, but he did not look comfortable. His gaze found mine at once. I hope I am not intruding, he said. You are not, my aunt replied before I could speak. But you may begin by explaining why you look as though you carry a burden. He did not sit at first. He stood before us as if preparing to confess something that would change everything. I knew about Margaret, he said. The room fell silent. You knew. I repeated, yes. He finally took a seat, though his posture remained stiff. Philip and I were close once, he continued. He told me about her years ago. They were in love. My hands curled tightly in my lap. In love, I whispered. They planned to marry. The words felt like a second blow. They did marry, Sebastian said quietly, in secret. I stared at him, unable to speak. For a short time, he continued. Philip's father found out. He had the marriage annulled using his influence. The records were erased. Margaret was sent away. The room seemed to tilt. She was not just a mistress, I said slowly. She was his wife. Yes. A strange calm settled over me, a calm that came when pain became too deep to react to. Why did you never tell me? I asked him. His jaw tightened. It was not my place, and I believed he would grow to love you in time. He did not, I said. Sebastian's eyes softened. He should have. The weight of those words lingered in the air. My aunt spoke carefully. What else are you not saying? Sebastian hesitated. There is more. My heart began to pound. Philip found Margaret again 10 years ago, he said. They resumed contact, letters, meetings. I believe the will was his attempt to correct what had been taken from her. And what was taken from me? I asked quietly. He looked at me with something close to regret. You were never meant to be punished. But I was, I said, publicly. Sebastian reached into his coat and removed a folded letter. I found this among Philip's private papers, he said. It was hidden. The solicitor did not know it existed. My fingers trembled as I took it. It was addressed to me. I unfolded the paper slowly. My dear Alina, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I must finally speak the truth I lacked courage to say while alive. I married you knowing my heart belonged to another. I told myself it was duty. I believed time would change me. It did not. My vision blurred, but I kept reading. You deserved honesty. You deserved love. I gave you neither fully. The will I have drafted provides you security. Margaret receives the estate as restitution for what was taken from her. You will have enough to begin anew. Do not hate me for being weak. The letter ended there. Security. He meant to leave me more than $1, I whispered. Sebastian nodded slowly. The original will left you far more. The change was made during his final days. A chill ran through me. Who was with him during those days? My aunt asked quietly. Prudence visited often, Sebastian said. Too often, and each visit his condition worsened. The air in the room felt heavy. You are suggesting something terrible, my aunt said carefully. I am suggesting that his death may not have been natural. The words struck like thunder. I thought of Prudence leaning over Philip's bed, of the tonic she insisted on bringing herself, of how quickly his fever had grown worse. No, I whispered, she would not. Sebastian's expression did not change. The apothecary who prepared Philip's medicine has disappeared, he said. My heart began to race. Disappeared. Closed his shop the morning after Philip died. No explanation. The pieces began to move inside my mind. Prudence's satisfaction during the reading, her quick smile, her lack of shock. If Philip had lived, Sebastian continued carefully, he might have changed the will again. Silence fell over the room. The fire cracked in the hearth, loud in the stillness. Why would she risk such a thing? I asked. Because if the original will stood, he said, you would have received a large portion of the estate, and Margaret's claim could have caused scandal. Prudence and her husband are not wealthy on their own. Control of the estate benefits them. My stomach turned. You believe she weakened him, made sure he signed the altered will. And then ensured he would not recover, Sebastian finished quietly. I stood and walked toward the window. The sky outside was clear for the first time in days. Sunlight touched the wet grass. I sat beside him every night, I said softly. I watched him fade. And you loved him, Sebastian said. I closed my eyes. I believed I did. When I turned back toward him, something inside me had shifted. If there is even a chance that what you are saying is true, I said, then I will not sit quietly while she walks free. Sebastian stepped closer. You will not face this alone. Why? I asked. The question had been building inside me since the day before. Why are you helping me? He held my gaze steadily. Because I have admired you for years, he said. Because I watched you try to love a man who did not give you his heart. And because I cannot stand by while injustice destroys you again. My breath caught. There was no mockery in his eyes, no hidden agenda, only something warm and steady. You deserve truth, he added softly, truth. I had not realized how much I needed that word. My aunt folded her hands calmly. If this is to be investigated, it must be done carefully, quietly. Accusations without proof will destroy you. Sebastian nodded. I will travel to Boston. I will find the apothecary. If there is wrongdoing, it will leave a trail. And I asked. You gather what you can from the servants, he said. They trusted you. For the first time since the will had been read, I felt something stronger than humiliation. Purpose. If Prudence had touched Philip's death, if she had reduced my life to $1 for her own gain, then she would answer for it. Sebastian moved toward the door, then paused. I will return with answers, he said. As he left, I realized something else had shifted inside me. When Philip had died, I thought my life had ended. When the will was read, I thought my worth had been erased. But now, standing in my aunt's warm drawing room with sunlight breaking through the windows, I understood something clearly. This was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a fight, and I was no longer afraid to face it. The truth did not come with shouting or drama. It came quietly, in whispers, in missing records, in fear behind a trembling man's eyes. 3 weeks passed after Sebastian first spoke his suspicion aloud. 3 long weeks of careful questions and guarded visits. We did nothing openly. Prudence believed herself safe. That confidence became her weakness. Sebastian traveled to Boston under the excuse of estate business. I remained in Hartford with my aunt, writing letters and speaking to the few servants who had once trusted me at Ashworth Manor. They were afraid at first, loyal to the family name, careful with their words. But little by little, the pattern began to form. Prudence had visited Philip every day during the final week of his illness, every single day. She insisted on bringing his medicine herself. She dismissed the servants whenever she entered his room, and after each visit, his condition worsened. I remembered it clearly now. The way his hands trembled more after she left, the way his skin turned pale, the way his breathing grew shallow. At the time, I had blamed the fever. Now doubt wrapped around every memory. Then Sebastian found the apothecary. Mr. Harold Finch had closed his shop the morning after Philip's death. No explanation, no farewell. He had vanished. Sebastian tracked him to Baltimore, a small boarding house near the docks. The man was hiding like a criminal. When Sebastian returned and told us, his voice was calm, but his eyes held something fierce. He did not need much convincing, Sebastian said. The man was already broken. What did he say? I asked, my hands gripping the arms of my chair. Sebastian looked at me steadily. She came to him, he said. Lady Whitmore. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. At first she asked for something mild, he continued, for nerves, for sleep. Then she returned and asked for something stronger and stronger. What did he give her? I whispered. Sebastian did not look away. Arsenic. The word seemed to echo through the room. Small doses, he added, enough to weaken him slowly, enough to make it look like illness. I felt cold all over. Arsenic. I had watched Philip suffer. I had held his hand as he grew weaker by the hour, and all that time poison had been slipping into his body. Why would she do this? I asked, though I already knew. Because if he recovered, Sebastian said quietly, he might have changed the will again. The letter Philip had written, the hidden one. The one that promised security. He had meant to leave me more than $1. Prudence had made sure he did not have the chance. Evidence began to grow quickly after that. Financial records showed large payments from Richard Whitmore to the apothecary. Letters written in Prudence's careful handwriting spoke of final arrangements and certainty. Servants agreed to testify that she alone had administered the last doses of medicine. When the authorities arrived at her Boston residence, she screamed that it was a lie. She accused me. She accused Sebastian. She claimed we were jealous, that we wanted the estate for ourselves, but the proof was too strong. Richard attempted to flee the country. He was caught at the docks with forged papers and stolen funds from his own business partners. His crimes unfolded beside hers like a second scandal. The newspapers devoured the story. Society woman arrested for brother's murder, poison and fortune in Ashworth scandal. I did not attend the trial. I had watched Philip die once. I would not watch his sister condemned. Sebastian attended every day. Each evening he returned to my aunt's house and told me what had happened. Prudence denied everything, but Mr. Finch testified. The servants testified. The letters were read aloud in court. The jury took less than an hour. Guilty. Prudence was sentenced to life in prison. Richard received 15 years for fraud and conspiracy. And just like that, the storm ended. Philip's original will was restored using the hidden letter Sebastian had discovered. The court recognized his true intentions. I received the Boston townhouse and a generous yearly income, enough to live comfortably, enough to begin again. Margaret retained Ashworth Manor and the larger estate as Philip had meant. There was no bitterness between us. After the verdict, Margaret asked to meet me. I agreed. We met in a quiet parlor in Boston. She looked tired but lighter somehow. "I never wanted this to be your fate," she said softly. "Nor yours," I replied. We sat across from one another, not as rivals, but as two women who had loved the same flawed man and paid different prices for it. "He loved you," I said. "And he respected you," she answered. Perhaps that was the truth. Perhaps we had both held pieces of him but never the whole. She used her fortune to establish a home for governesses who had nowhere else to go. It was her quiet way of protecting the young woman she once had been. I respected her for that. Weeks later, I stood in my aunt's garden beneath the old oak tree where I had once played as a child. Autumn leaves drifted gently around me. The air was cool and clear. Sebastian approached without a sound. "It is finished," he said softly. "Yes," I replied. Philip's name had been cleared of scandal. His death had truth attached to it now. His final attempt to make peace between his past and present had not been completely destroyed. And I was no longer the woman who had stood humiliated in that drawing room. I had fought. I had uncovered the truth. I had reclaimed my name. "How do you feel?" Sebastian asked. I thought carefully before answering. "Free," I said. He studied my face as if committing it to memory. There was something unspoken between us now, something that had grown quietly during these weeks of shared purpose and late conversations. When he looked at me, I did not see pity. I saw admiration and something warmer, but I also knew that freedom was new to me. For 7 years, I had lived in a marriage built on duty and silence. I had been chosen for convenience, not for love. Now, for the first time in my life, I stood without obligation tying me to a man's name. Sebastian stepped closer, but not too close. "I am glad you are free," he said quietly. His voice held meaning deeper than the words. And as the last leaves fell from the oak tree around us, I realized something else. I was no longer defined by $1. I was no longer the woman left behind in a will. I was a woman who had faced betrayal, uncovered murder, and survived humiliation. And for the first time, I was beginning to wonder what it might feel like to be loved without conditions. But I did not yet know if I was brave enough to choose that kind of love. Not yet. Winter passed slowly, but it did not feel heavy the way the months before had felt. For the first time in years, I woke each morning without the weight of pretending. There were no separate bedrooms, no cold dinners across long tables, no careful smiles for a husband who looked through me instead of at me. I was no longer Mrs. Ashworth. I was simply a leaner. Sebastian visited often. At first, it was always with purpose. Estate matters, legal papers, updates about the Boston house that now belonged to me. But gradually the reasons became smaller. A book he thought I would enjoy, news from town, a walk in the garden. He never rushed me, never demanded anything. He stood beside me as if waiting for me to decide my own future. One afternoon in early spring, I stood beneath the oak tree in my aunt's garden. The air was soft, carrying the scent of new blossoms. The world felt as if it were waking up again. Sebastian approached quietly as he always did. "It is finished," he said gently. "Yes," I replied. Prudence had been transferred to a distant prison. Richard's appeals had failed. The scandal had begun to fade from the newspapers. Philip's name was no longer spoken with suspicion. Everything had settled. Yet something inside me still felt unsettled. Sebastian studied my face. "You are thinking deeply." "I was married for 7 years," I said slowly, "and I do not know if I was ever truly loved." He did not interrupt. "I do not want to choose wrongly again," I admitted. His eyes softened, but his voice remained steady. "Then do not choose from fear, choose from truth." The wind moved gently through the branches above us. "I told you once that I admired you," he continued. "That was not pity, it was not convenience, it was not rebellion against a friend. It was quiet and patient. I have waited 7 years, Alina. I would wait longer if you asked." My heart trembled at his words. "You waited," I whispered. "Yes," he said simply. "Because I knew you deserved to discover your own worth first." No one had ever spoken to me that way. Not as a possession, not as a duty, not as a solution to a problem, but as a woman, as myself. He reached into his coat slowly and removed a small velvet box. My breath caught. "I do not offer you security," he said. "You already have that. I do not offer you rescue. You rescued yourself. I offer you partnership, respect, and love that does not hide." He opened the box. Inside rested a gold ring set with a deep blue sapphire. "This belonged to my mother," he said quietly. "She believed love should be chosen freely, not arranged, not forced." My chest felt tight, but not from pain, from hope. "Will you marry me?" he asked. There was no pressure in his voice, no demand, only truth. I thought of the drawing room at Ashworth Manor, of Prudence's smile, of the single dollar that had once reduced my life to humiliation. I thought of the fight that followed, of the strength I found, of the way Sebastian had stood beside me, not in front of me. I stepped closer. "I was once valued at $1, I said softly. "I believed that meant I was worth nothing." His hand tightened slightly around the small box. "But I learned something," I continued. "A man's will does not measure a woman's worth." His eyes never left mine. "And I will not let fear decide my future," I finished. I placed my hand over his. "Yes," I said. For a second he did not move, as if he needed to be certain he had heard correctly. "Yes," I repeated, smiling through tears I did not try to hide. Relief and joy crossed his face at the same time. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. When he pulled me into his arms, it felt different from every embrace I had known before. There was no distance, no doubt, no shadow of another woman's name between us, only warmth, only certainty. We married in late spring in a small church outside Hartford. It was simple, no grand display, no society gossip. My aunt stood proudly beside me. Margaret attended quietly, offering a gentle smile that held no bitterness. We were not enemies. We never had been. We were 2 women who had survived the same man in different ways. When I stood at the altar, Sebastian looked at me as if I were the only person in the world, not because of my name, not because of my position, but because of me. And when he said his vows, his voice did not shake from obligation. It carried devotion. Years later, people would still whisper about the Ashworth scandal, about the sister who poisoned her brother, about the mistress who inherited a fortune, about the wife who was left $1. They never knew the full story. They never knew that the $1 had been the beginning of my freedom. It forced me out of a house where love never lived. It forced me to question what I had accepted. It forced me to fight for truth. And in that fight, I found something priceless. I found my strength. I found justice. And I found a love that did not measure my worth in money. I was once left $1 in a room full of humiliation, but I walked away with something far greater. I walked away chosen. Not by duty, not by arrangement, but by love. And this time I chose back.